Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Sustainable Climate Change Institutional Memory. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you're all doing well. This webinar is organized within the framework of the CBIT project, the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency in Climate Change. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Emsal Ayredine. I'm a legal associate within this project. Unfortunately, I cannot open my camera due to internet issues to have a more stable internet. Well, the focus of today's webinar is to present to you two draft reports prepared within this project and two really important draft reports for the outcomes of the CBIT project. The first one will be the draft report on institutional capacity assessment prepared by the HEAT International experts. This draft report analyzes the necessary institutional capacities for implementation of ambitious climate actions from strategic documents in country and suggests several concrete solutions which will be discussed throughout this webinar. And secondly is the draft report from assessment of current climate change policy and regulatory framework within the development of climate change MRV platform, which is being prepared by the team of experts from Ether. This scoping report presented today will be a step forward to establish a well-functioning web-based MRV platform for the institutional arrangements in country, which will help the country to track the outcomes related to climate change. This MRV platform, or the IT tool, also needs to be backed up or supported by the broader MRV system, which will include all the elements of MRV and also needs to be addressed with proper legal instrument. Initially, the draft law on climate change and its supporting secondary legislation has provided has enabled an environment for this MRV platform and the system overall by overreaching policy coordination processes and defining the legal mechanism for establishing of national system for monitoring and reporting of the GHG emissions, as well as monitoring and reporting of the implementation of the mitigation and adaptation policies, measures, and projections. Hopefully, this draft law will be adopted soon. And after the adoption, the next step forward would be a compilation or preparation of a bylaw, a rule book on the form and the content of the MRV system, which also will determine the list of authorities and organizations who will be in charge of developing and reporting policies and measures towards GHG emission reductions. Without further ado, I would like to present to you today's presenters. From the side of HEAT, we have Alexandra Dedinets. She's an assistant professor at Faculty of Computer Science and Engineering in Skopje. For the purposes of this assignment of this report, she was engaged as climate change specialist. She has also participated in several projects that address the national climate change mitigation pathways and within which the national targets for GHG emission reductions are developed. Also, we have Darko Janevski, who has 20 years of professional experience in public administration reforms, e-government, administrative procedures, public procurements, and energy. He is also specialized in drafting laws and bylaws, including also the transposition of EU directives into national legislation. And lastly, by the side of HEAT, we have Marian Nikolov, who is an economist and researcher within the with a deep practical knowledge in the organization of public administration in North Macedonia and experience in the provision of capacity building to local government for public administration reform. For the purposes of this assignment, he was engaged as finance specialist who is responsible for setting up financial roadmap of long-term support for climate change unit. On the other hand, from Ether, we have two experts. The presenter will be Justin Goodwin, who is also director of Ether and has 20 years of experience in practical development and continuous review and improvement for MRV and transparency systems. He is also one of the members of the UNFCCC lead reviewer community for the European Union. Also for the European Union, through his work, he has worked with the European Environment Agency. On the other hand, we have Lawrence Opie, who is senior consultant at Ether, with expertise in supporting national governments to implement transparency systems, EU industrial emissions reporting, and GHG inventory development. He is also certified reviewer of NCs, BRs, and BURs, and also co-authored several chapters for BURs of non-Annex 1 countries. Here are some general rules regarding the webinar. As you know, the microphones during the presentations will be muted. If you have a technical problem or want to ask a question, you can use the chat box or raise your hand to ask question or raise a discussion. If you need translation, you can switch between channels in the interpretation section. Now I would like to ask the manager of this project, of the CBIT project, to do an introductory speech. And later on, if Ms. Teodora Obradović-Gončarovska, a focal point for UNFCCC and the State Counselor for climate change issues, if she is present, and then I would like also to give her words. Thank you, and Pavlina, you may continue.
Thank you. I think that Teodora is here, so Teodora, maybe you can start.
Yeah, just a few words from my side. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Emsal, for this great introductory. I would not compliment with so much because you covered the main aspects. What is important from our side as a ministry is to focus not maybe just on policies. And
Teodora, we don't hear you well. I'm sorry.
And now, Pavlina?
Now it's better, yes. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I would not go too much in details. I would like just to point it out that it is important for that rule book that you mentioned, Emsal, which will be based on the law on climate action, to put attention also on industry, not just on policies and measures between the institutions. Of course, it is very important, but it is also important for us to include in MRV but aspects on further requirements on industry sector potentially covered by future EU ETS. So we would like to see institutional report as well as MRV report somehow related also with the aspects, not just on administration, but also future requirements from the industry side related with the future EU ETS. If it's not the right place, maybe within these documents, at least a recommendation on how it need to be covered with the future MRV platform will be appreciated. I will not take further on of your time. I would like just to underline that it is not the first, those two are not the first reports, unfortunately. Some of them are already developed within the other projects, but there are no significant movements in the implementation of already developed reports. So it's up to all of us to implement what was said, but at the same time to propose measures which are feasible. Thank you. I wish you good work, and we would be happy to see the final results of our final reports to mention it again, to be as feasible as possible, to be implementable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teodora. I would like to welcome you all. I hope that you were interested by the title of the event. It was not, it was intentionally created like that because we see these two subjects that will be presented today as first steps for creating really sustainable and institutional memory. It will not be something fancy and modern as blockchain technology, but it will be a significant forward, having in mind the current platforms and responsibilities and requirements from UNFCCC, from EU, and from the energy community. So without further ado, I would like to call now the first presenters, the representatives from the HIT, from the company HIT, to present the administrative capacity assessments they have identified as necessary for our country, specifically for our country. So who will start? Alexandra?
Yeah, I will start.
Just speak louder, please.
Yeah, okay. Just let me first share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, there it is. Okay, so I will start with the presentation of the report of conducting climate change administrative capacity assessment. And besides the three of us that will present today, this work was supported by HIT, especially Julia Watt and Irene Pabst, to which we are really thankful. And it's also supported by Matej Gasperic, who was responsible. He was international climate change specialist and was responsible for the development of representation of the institutional setup in Slovenia under the EU climate acquis framework. So, and his work is mainly presented in an annex of this report. So the objective of the study is to conduct systemic and institutional capacity assessment of the national administrative capacity to fulfill the obligations towards UNFCCC as a non-Annex 1 party, and also as those that will arise when we become Annex 1 party. Also commitments arising as a member of energy community and future commitments as a candidate EU member. So it's the main focus is not only what tasks and capacity will be needed after we join the European Union, but in the meantime, what capacity is needed to prepare the country to be a member state of European Union. So the outline of the presentation is first we will describe shortly the methodology. So Darko will represent the methodology. Then I will represent what are the tasks for which climate change capacity, in fact, institutional capacity is needed. What are the requirements related to climate change? Then Darko will give an overview and findings on current institutional capacity. Then based on these two, number 2 and 3, we have created what are the requirements of administrative capacity per climate change process, and then presented recommendations. We will present recommendations concrete for posts related to climate change. And finally, Marian will present what is the financial roadmap that is needed to implement these recommendations. So Darko, will you continue now with the methodology?
Yes, thank you, Alexandra. Hello, everyone. One of the tasks we have been given was to develop methodology for capacity assessment for implementation of climate change related activities. And it was seen not as a methodology that will be one-time use, but also used for any similar future assessment that we expect to be conducted from time to time. Having this in mind, we develop a methodology that is actually not reinventing the wheel. It is based on what is already present as methodology for similar capacity assessments, like the official national methodology for functional analysis of the public sector institutions. And here I would also like to mention that we also have taken what the EU project on climate action did approximately 1 year ago with a similar assessment, which already was mentioned by Theodora. What we created, in my opinion, is a user-friendly methodology that can be implemented by any public institution in this field. Here on this and on the next slide, you can see the steps that comprise this methodology. Of course, for start of any serious assessment, we think that there must be a decision from the top management of the institution, so to say, to give a weight for the entire process to be conducted, and also with decision to appoint a staff that will conduct the assessment. Alexandra, could you go to the next slide, please? Okay, the steps that follow are actually to develop sort of a mini action plan where all the phases, responsible persons, and deadlines will be given. Then it should be taken into consideration the documents that need to be collected and further analyzed, and also to adapt the questionnaires. As you can see on this slide, we have given some sort of an instruction to those that will conduct this type of an assessments regarding the documents that they need to take in consideration when conducting the desk review. And also what we did, and I consider this as an added value from our side to what is already present as a methodology, is the sort of adapting what is already existing as a questionnaire with specific questions that relate to the climate changes aspects. So the institutional arrangements, but with specifics related to the climate change actions. And another, in my opinion, added value that we have with this methodology is that we actually guide those that will conduct this type of assessments with the most difficult part of any assessment, the assessment or the analysis at the end, after conducting all after collecting all the documents, interviewing persons, completing the questionnaires. You need to know how to analyze all this data. So we sort of give guidance what the collected data should indicate, and based on that, what type of finding or recommendation to be given. And at the end of this short presentation about the methodology, I would like to say that due to the short period of time that we had, and also above all, the fact that recently the people from the ministry were also part of other similar assessments, we sort of simplified and not used all the steps within this methodology, because we already had the data without even going through all these interviews and meetings and completion of questionnaires that this methodology foresees. So this would be it for the methodology.
Okay, I will continue with the requirements related to climate change. So basically, the first thing that we have done is that we have evaluated what tasks, for which tasks capacity is needed in terms of the requirements towards EU, energy community, and UNFCCC, including the Paris Agreement. So I will speak about these first major EU policies and legislation, including the emission monitoring and reporting, EU ETS, effort sharing, and etc. So I will shortly only describe some of these points, starting with the emissions monitoring and reporting. So the relevant EU legislation here is the regulation on the governance, by which we should prepare a national energy and climate plan every 10 years, long-term strategies every 10 years, biannual progress reports of the National Energy and Climate Plan and greenhouse gas inventories every year. So energy community also adopted a recommendation for the contracting parties to prepare National Energy and Climate Plan. And in terms of the national context, so the transposition of these documents has already started. So, for example, the National Energy and Climate Plan and the biannual progress reports are transposed into the energy law. And this is the responsibility of the Ministry of Economy. And the first Macedonia National Energy and Climate Plan was prepared last year by MANO. It was first one among the energy community countries. The other two documents, the long-term strategy and the greenhouse gas inventories, they are transposed in the draft version of the law on climate action and are responsibility of the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning. Again, the first draft version of the long-term strategy was prepared last year by GFA Consulting Group and additional experts. And we have also preparing regularly GAG inventories as parts of our duties towards UNFCCC, which were prepared mainly by MANU, Institute of Agriculture, Faculty of Agriculture, Hansen Faculty of Forestry, and additional experts. Additional transparency is provided by the National Climate Change Platform, the klímatski pромени.mk. In terms of EU policies, one of the major policy which EU has used to reduce the GHG emissions is the EU ETS. It's the first one and remains one of the first large and remains one of the largest ETS systems in the world and represents an example for the other countries, which has to be in line, combined with the MRR regulation. In order to ensure that every ton of CO2 is reported, which means that every operator or installations and aircraft operators should prepare annual emission report, which is verified by an independent accredited verifier. So before accessing the EU ETS, now Energy Community has launched a study on carbon pricing in energy community countries, with the aim to prepare the countries for or to propose transitional carbon pricing mechanisms to prepare the countries to join the EU ETS. Also, carbon pricing is proposed in the energy strategy, the enhanced NDC, so in the national documents. So what are the tasks that need to be performed in this relation for which probably capacity will be needed? Well, first, the legislation should be adapted. And based on whether it will be a national ETS system, we're talking for the period before joining the EU ETS. If it's national ETS system, then we need to conduct auctions, establish a commission for monitoring these auctions, develop a register of credits, monitoring of emission verification, and etc. If it's a carbon tax, then no major task other than the adaptation of the legal framework is needed, and no other that are already being done. However, which one will be selected? Right now, UNDP is also supporting a project for developing a report on how this transitional period in terms of which carbon pricing mechanism should be implemented. In terms of effort sharing, unlike the EU ETS system, which is one policy for all the ETS countries, for effort sharing, every country, every member state is responsible for its own policies and measures. And this effort sharing regulation includes all the gases according to IPCC, except the ones that are part of EU ETS. What we can do here, what tasks can be identified? Well, transposition of this regulation, In fact, what this effort sharing regulation means, it means to propose policies and measures in the other sectors, such as in the transport sector, heating and cooling options, energy efficiency measures, and etc. We have even now proposed policies and measures in these sectors, but what we can do is to calculate the target of North Macedonia in line with the EU decision, by implementing these policies and measures to calculate what will be our target in terms of this effort sharing regulation, and then monitor this target achievement. In terms of land-based emissions, the major regulation here is the one for inclusion of the GHG emissions and removals from the LULUCF sector. What are the tasks here identified? Transposition of this regulation, verify that in the already developed documents, we include the GHG emissions and removals in line with this regulation, and verify that we fulfill the commitment of this regulation. And also development of National Forestry Accounting Plan, which is again according to this regulation. Tasks related to road transport and energy efficiency and renewable sources. Most of the regulations are already transposed in the national legislation. What's still missing is the regulation on new vehicles to the law, the transposition of the regulations on new vehicles to the law on vehicles, which is responsibility of the Ministry of Economy. Also, what can be done here, the task that should be done is with the new law on vehicle tax, now the customs authority can read the data on CO2 for each vehicle, and they insert this data into their database, the database of the Ministry of Interior, and this should be coordinated with the new MRV platform. So these are the tasks for which capacity will be needed to coordinate these two systems. Also, in terms of energy efficiency and renewable energy sources, monitoring verification of the data that will be entered in the MVP platform, which is a platform similar to MRV, but only for energy efficiency measures, for which coordination, of course, is needed between these two platforms. Monitoring the implementation of the renewable energy sources measure is needed, and also input of the renewable energy sources in the MRV platform. And for both of these parts, coordination and monitoring of the implementation of the projects that will be defined in details into the new program for realization of the energy strategy is needed by the Ministry of Economy and Energy Agency. So this program is in fact going to take all the strategic documents developed by now, such as the energy strategy, enhanced NDC, and prepare a detailed step-by-step program for their realization. The job of the ministries, of the Ministry of Economy and Energy Agency should be to coordinate and monitor the implementation of these projects. In terms of adaptation, adaptation is one great part of the European Green Deal, and the Commission presented the new strategy on adaptation just a few days ago, I mean, two or 3 days ago. And the previous strategy on adaptation, the major focus, the main point was on developing national adaptation strategies for the countries. So basically all of the EU countries have developed either a national adaptation strategy or national adaptation plan. Adaptation is also part of the other documents, such as the long-term strategy, national communication, biennial update reports. With the support of UNDP, it is expected that in Macedonia, the first national adaptation plan will be finished by 2024, and the governmental focal point for this is the cabinet of the Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs. In terms of other requirements towards UNFCCC, including the Paris Agreement, we have the reporting requirements for national communications, NDCs, biennial reports or biennial update reports, which are going to be replaced by the biennial transparency reports, where a detailed set of modality MPGs modalities, procedures, and guidelines are presented for reporting the measures given in the NDC. If these BUR are updated on the national communications, these are more to report on the measures presented and in the NDCs with detailed MPGs here. And the first BTR must be submitted by all parties no later than the end of 2024, and also the GAG inventory. For closer cooperation, the Convention Secretariat developed network of focal points. So here I will not go into details, are listed the focal points which we have and for which focal points should be designated. These are the documents that have been prepared by Macedonia up to now with the support of UNDP. Well, UNDP has really invested a lot into creating a capacity, mainly in MANU, the Institute of Agriculture, Faculty of Agricultural Sciences and Food, Hansen Faculty of Forest Sciences, and additional experts for developing these documents. What is needed in the future is to develop the fourth national communication this year. Then in 2022, we should develop the fourth BUR. And this is approximately in 2024, the first BTR. Since already developed BUR are really closely in line with the guidelines given in the BTR, maybe we can even try to prepare BTR even in this period, but that's something that we need to discuss. The next NTC should be developed in 2025. Okay, the overview and findings on current institutional capacity. Darko, can you please continue?
Yes, sure. I will try to be as brief as possible since what I'm going to present, I think, is well known to most of the participants on this event. So the Ministry of Environment and Spatial Planning is the key and leading institution in the field of climate change. What is the internal organization and staff in this ministry? We have state advisor on climate change, and this is the only position directly related to climate change that is actually staff, meaning that what you see on the second bullet, the Unit for Climate Change Policies, it exists only on paper, actually in the internal organization of the ministry, but it's not functional since none of the 5 envisaged posts are filled in. Of course, there are other sectors, organizational units within this ministry that work on certain climate change related tasks. Above all, I mean here on MAIDS, which is the Macedonian Environment Information Center that uses certain information technology systems to process data which is of relevance to climate change documents that has just Alexandra mentioned. I also here mentioned other organizational units that to a certain extent deal with climate change issues. Alexandra, we can go to the next slide. This gap that exists in the ministry in a way is bridged with the continuous donor support that the ministry receives, above all the UNDP. At the moment, the work of the ministry is supported with the 5 junior associates, which are embedded and perform climate-related tasks. And in addition to this, the full-time staff, UNDP is contracting various institutions that Alexandra mentioned to develop the strategic documents in the climate change area. Next institution that we have analyzed is the Cabinet of the Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Affairs, which has mainly coordination role. And at the moment, this cabinet, together with the cabinet of the Prime Minister, because they share certain resources, employ 3 persons that are fully devoted to issues such as energy, climate change, environment, and sustainable development. Alexandra, we can go to the next slide. Out of all other institutions, they play certain role in the climate change. We have put an emphasis on the Ministry of Economy and Energy Agency because energy is a really huge share in this climate change process. And what we have identified here, and it's again well known to all, is that we have lack of human resources. In the case of Energy Agency, we really have we lack human resources, while in the case of the Ministry of Economy, there is a number of people employed in the sector for energy, but the problem is that this ministry has faced, and actually this sector, with a huge staff turnover, and the experienced people have left the ministry, leaving them mostly with inexperienced person to cope with these challenging issues. And on the bottom of this slide, you can see also other institutions with the role they have in certain climate change processes. Alexandra, you can continue with the next slide.
Okay, so here we come to the part where we have evaluated what is the administrative capacity requirements per climate change process. And mostly we have seen that most of the tasks are for coordination and monitoring of the implementation of the proposed policies and measures. And most of the capacity is in fact needed in the MRV towards, in fact, the reporting towards EU Energy Community and UNFCCC, which are closely related, and we propose that the same capacity should support all of these reportings. So in these terms, there are a few reportings that we will mention. First is the GHG inventory. So according to the draft law on climate action, this obligation is allocated to the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning. So this, the first option is to entirely internalize this process to the ministry. The other option is to engage external entity or group of experts, as has been done up to now. And of course, there's a third option to combine the previous two. And we have proposed, in fact, the third one. So if we want, based on the draft version of the law, and if we want to increase the capacity of the ministry, then we are proposing 4 full-time employees for development of the GHG inventory. But of course, this should be supported by external entities, mainly the ones that have been involved in the preparation of these inventories up to now. And also the QA/QC process should still be from external entities. For the National Energy and Climate Plan and its progress reports, since it's an obligation for the Ministry of Economy, but it includes other sectors for which the Ministry of Environment is responsible, there is a need for establishment of coordination and joint efforts in developing these documents. But the development of these documents, for the development of these documents, scientific models are needed for projection of the emissions and for modeling each of the measures and the policies proposed. So therefore, it is recommended that an external entity develops these reports, but the Ministry of Economy can monitor and report on renewable energy sources. One full-time employee is advised. Energy Agency for administrating and processing the data in the MVP system, 2 full-time employees, and for the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning, regular communication and cooperation with the Ministry of Economy and Energy Agency. It's not a full-time employee, but part of the tasks of other employees. For the other reporting, NDCs, BTRs, NCs, long-term strategy on climate action, it's the same as development of the National Energy and Climate Plan. It is necessary to develop scientific models. It is recommended that an external authority prepares this mitigation analysis, and the needed capacity is more in terms of coordination and monitoring of the development of these processes. The MRV platform needs a special attention because it's a new platform, and given its complexity and the large number of entities involved, additional capacity will be needed in the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning. So we propose 2 full-time employees with engineering background. And for the adaptation, again, external authorities should prepare the strategic documents, but it should be coordinated and supported by the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning, not as a full-time employee, but as part of the tasks of other employees. And it is clear that additional capacity and adaptation will be needed, but the exact capacity will be determined after the preparation of these documents. But it will be probably needed. So it is recommended to continue building the capacity in this regard, such as the example of the CBIT Junior Associates. So now Darko will present the recommendations for the posts related to climate change.
Yes, in this section of the report, we go further. What Alexandra mentioned as the needed capacity. In this section, we actually not only give numbers, but we also identify the educational background of the staff that needs to be employed, and we give the job description in terms of the main tasks and responsibilities. As Alexandra mentioned, here I would like to emphasize once again that the number of staff needed is based on the preferred approach. And I would use the word that Theodora mentioned at the beginning, the realistic or feasible approach. And that is that leads us to the combination of strengthened internal administrative capacities in terms of, yes, we should rely on staff within the ministry, but let's be realistic that we cannot employ all the experts in the ministry, and therefore outsourcing certain scientific and other expert institutions will remain. Without going into details, since I think we have extended the 20 minutes limit we have been given, let us go to the next 2 slides, because I think that what was the saying, 1 picture, 1,000 words. So we give 2 options for the ministry. We prefer the option 1, which foresees 8 posts to be systemized that will directly work on climate-related tasks that Alexandra just mentioned, mainly related to GHG inventory and MRV platform, while the second option foresees two organizational units to be created, and since there are 2, there should be minimum 10 posts to be systemized. So you cannot see here on the slide, but it's given in the report. The level of the administrative servant, its educational background, and a detailed list of tasks that it should perform is given in the report. Now we go to the next slide, and the next 2 slides actually identify other organizational units within this ministry where we think that there should not be a separate new post introduced, but to the already existing posts that we point out, a specific list of tasks to be added. So here are the units related to EU harmonization with the EU legislation, or the unit for legal and normative affairs. Then we have the unit for our sector for spatial planning. On the next slide, we also mentioned that such changes or amendments should be made to the unit dealing with waste. And not to forget, very important unit is the unit for communication, public relation, and education, where a number of tasks related to climate change should be specified, such as the development and monitoring of the implementation of the climate change communication strategy, and also the maintenance or regular update of the web platform and the social media accounts related to climate change. With this said, I conclude the part for the Ministry of Environment, and just briefly, I already mentioned that the other two institutions that need to strengthen their internal capacities are the Ministry of Economy, where we think that one post should be fully dedicated to the plans and reports on energy and climate. While in the Energy Agency, having in mind the number of information systems that they are in charge to administer, we envisage that two administrative servants, preferably IT with IT background, should be fully dedicated to manage these energy efficiency information systems, which are very crucial for reporting on climate change. I think that this is it for this part, which now will be, if I'm not mistaken, yes, wrapped up by Maria.
Yes, but I would like to add something, Darko. You're missing adaptation component within your assessment, and you mentioned in your introductory, not you, but by your colleague. This is nothing more than we already assessed in our formal projects, but maybe that component on adaptation is lacking. You mentioned some sectors and departments within the ministry without mentioning nature conservation department or other water departments. We are dealing with adaptation components. So this is just related for mitigation aspects and for EU-related aspects of climate, let's say in that regard, and reporting obligations. So this is not all. We need additional changes and amendments within the existing structures. We are fully aware about this, and we will continue working on thinking how to fill in all these gaps until the time when this new entrants will enter into the official system, let's say in that regard. Thank you, Darko.
Thank you, Theodora. We will look at it and update this section in the final version of the report.
Can I add something? So we have in the report for the sector for spatial planning, the unit for development of policy plans and programs for waste management and etc. and other tasks for water resources and etc. But those tasks are only given, so we have not presented a detail posts such as we have done for the climate change processes within the climate change unit. And also for the adaptation, it was really hard, not easy to see the tasks because it's missing, as I said, the national adaptation strategy or a plan where we can see exactly and evaluate exactly what tasks are going to be needed and then relate exactly these tasks to the other departments. So that's why first, as I said, we would like to see these strategic documents in details presenting the task, because right now the most important task in each of them is the creation of the national adaptation plan or a strategy. So therefore, we cannot really see what exactly tasks are needed. Thank you. Marian, will you continue with the presentation now?
Само да проверам, Анита, дали сакавте да се вклучите или случајно микрофонот е... добро. Маријан, продолжете.
Не, случајно, извинете.
Pavlina, можем? Okay, so I will be really brief, given that we exceeded the time allocated for us. So it's like this. What already Alexandra explained in what can also be considered as implicit needs assessment and what is to be expected from the two options presented by Darko in the organograms. What I'm going to explain to you here is what our approach was to put on monetary scale, what Alexandra and Darko already explained. So basically, I'm using a top-down costing approach So I'm taking into account the historical base of historical track record of costing of costs in the public sector in Macedonia, given the budget actual realization. And I'm using the main cost drivers. Of course, the main cost drivers in our case is the human resources. And then given the two options presented by Darko, we did a Microsoft Excel modeling in taking into account the economic classification of the budget. So basically, we are taking into account the wages and salaries for the civil servants and the proper legislation that is regulating the monetary base for the civil servants. For the option 1, given the Macedonian specific, there are in total 2023 scores. For the option 2, 2,570. Each score, the proper administrative level, each score is monetized at 81.6 Macedonian dinars. Now, on top of that, I'm increasing even again the Macedonian legislation particularities, a 10% increase for the education level, 51% increase for salary contributions, and also I'm touching to the human resources additional budget allocations that are related to the goods and services, capital expenditures, and other that are particularities of the Macedonian budget realization in the period 2015-2019. On top of that, we also consulted the handbook on institutional arrangements to support climate action support, and there we saw that sometimes there is for busy times there is a need for backup support. So we increased the human resources with the wages and salaries by 30% to take into account the backstopping, succession planning, and backup support for busy times. Now in the next slide, what I already explained, the next slide gives the monetary summary of what I already discussed. So for the option 1, there is a 128,000 euro per annum in total to plan for the budget resources for public finances in the country. So the public, the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning should plan per annum almost 130,000 euros for the actions and the functions that are presented by Alexandra Darko. And for the option 2, you can see a certain dynamics there because, as already said by Darko, it's more complex in a sense that requires more additional human resources compared to the option 1. And this one in option 2, planned by 2025, it's almost 300,000 euros. So this is it about the financial roadmap and about our presentation. Thank you.
Marian, just to clarify, so these numbers were only for the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning, not for the other institutions and ministries that were taken into consideration in the report?
Exactly. As I said, these are the public finances for that ministry, and it's practically the marginal addition that is allocated only for these two options, which organogram was presented by Darko. Thanks.
Okay. Darko Blinkov has put some comments. Darko, would you like to speak? Darko? So his comments are related to the, okay. Then he is not in a position to speak, so I will go through the comment shortly. You can read it in more details. The comment is around that the need to urgent reorganization has been highlighted in the last two EC reports for the chapter 27 on the environment and climate change. And he provides some more details about the steps and the role of the inspection supervision in this part, and the need for inspection supervision law changes for the administrative to address the administrative barriers, among others. Okay, any more comments or feedback on the issues that were presented by HEAT?
Can I add in the meantime? I would like just to emphasize one more time that besides, only as Darko mentioned, besides the number of posts that are going to be needed, we have in detail represented what educational background is needed, the list of tasks evaluated, and etc. for each of these posts. So, but this is represented in the report in a lot of details, but for the purposes of this short limit of time, we have only presented this as a number and only the name of the position, job position.
Okay, thank you. Valentina Stardelova, please unmute.
Yes, thank you, Pavlina. I would like to speak Macedonian. Please press button.
No problem.
Translation. Благодарам за презентацијата, благодарам за поканата на состанок. Навистина е од особена важност за нас да ја слушнеме, да ги слушнеме наодите всушност кои беа презентирани на овој вебинар по однос на институционалните капацитети на клучните институции, пред се на Министерството за животна средина, но и нашите. Би сакала во оваа прилика да информирам дека ние го препознавме новиот момент веднаш кога отпочнавме да работиме на националниот план за енергија и клима, нормално со техничка помош. Истовремено направивме и функционална анализа за потребите на соодветни човечки ресурси во секторот за енергетика и врз основа на таа функционална анализа подготвивме нов правилник за внатрешна систематизација и организација на секторот за енергетика и наместо постоечките 3 оделенија направивме оделението за обновливи извори за енергетска ефикасност. Предложивме да биде поделено на 2 оделенија каде што ќе можат да се на кој начин би можеле да се фокусираме всушност на новите потреби поврзани со енергетската транзиција и новото законодавство кое што произлегува од Европската унија, за кој што имаме обврски спрема енергетска заедница. И она што е најважно во овој контекст за кој што денес зборуваме, имаме и ново, значи 5-то оделение, кое што всушност треба да ги следи сите стратешки документи во областа на енергетиката, почнувајќи од стратегијата за енергетика, националниот план за енергија и клима и соодветно да комуницира со општините за да видиме како всушност целите и таргетите кои што се наведени во NECP-то се остваруваат на терен. Ова се уште е во драфт верзија, обезбедено едно првично мислење од надлежните институции од МИОА. Тие во однос на оваа структура немаат забелешки и јас би била по далекусежна и би рекла дека мислам така гледам на работите. Тоа е моje лично мислење дека еден човек не е доволен да се справи со сите овие задачи кои што произлегуваат од кои што ќе произлезат од стратешките документи. Но ова е само значи наш иден план за реорганизација на вработените во секторот за енергетика. Како што беше и напоменето, се уште има недостаток на квалификувани човечки ресурси во секторот за енергетика и тоа е прашање кое што подолго време се провлекува во институциите и треба да се осврнеме на тоа со еден пристап кој што всушност ќе ни овозможи да ги согледаме причините за одливот на квалификуван кадар за една ваква клучна област која што е носител на економскиот развој во државата. Не би имала повеќе да должам, само би сакала на крајот да укажам дека наодите кои што беа презентирани значи од мој личен аспект би требало да се осврнат, да се прошират во смисла на зголемување на капацитетот на луѓето кои што ќе бидат задолжени за овие климатски аспекти, односно за собирање и обработка на податоците, бидејќи институционалната поставеност и постоењето на човечки кадар внатре во институцијата е предуслов за незиното успешно работење, имајќи предвид дека после самитот во Софија за Западен Балкан, навистина ќе можеме да одговориме на овие прашања и да успееме да најдеме решенија и начини и проекти само доколку имаме квалификуван кадар во Министерството, во секторот за енергетика.
Благодарам, Валентина. Многу важни поенти и истакна и се осврна. Јас би сакала само да прашам дали би можеле да ги вклучиме овие делови од вашата функционална спецификација, ако веќе не се темени.
Тоа сакам да прашам.
Во овој момент, бидејќи тоа не е во надлежност на секторот за енергетика, сепак тоа се процедури за кои што е надлежен друг сектор и јас се извинувам во името на секторот за човечки ресурси од нашето министерство кој што беше доцна повикан, вистинскиот човек и не можеше да се вклучи во оваа дискусија, но земав обврска јас лично да пренесам. Ќе ви одговорам дополнително дали можеме да ги споделиме со вас драфт верзијата од правилникот за систематизација и внатрешна организација.
Благодарам многу.
Да, јас би сакала да додадам нешто, значи јас благодарам на известувањето. И комплетно се согласувам дека квалификуван кадар е потребен. Ние тука гледавме на вистина да бидеме по-реалистични, значи да не одиме со огромни бројки кога ја знаеме моменталната ситуација. Меѓутоа, на вистина би сакале да видиме дали нашата анализа, нашите задачи кои што се предложени тука, значи, дали се во согласност со функционалната анализа која што моментално се изработува. Би било добро, можеби и некој посебен состанок за тоа, доколку не може да се сподели самиот документ, меѓутоа да видиме дали, да речеме, овие задачи кои што ние ги предлагаме тука, дали се вклучени во вашата функционална, во предлогот на функционалната анализа. Во однос на Министерството, во однос на Агенцијата за енергетика, значи ние тука предлагаме минимум 2 вработени кои што во главно би требало да надгледуваат и да на некој начин да ја следат работата на собирање на податоци од самите од самите ентитети, да речам. Така што мислиме дека 2 за тоа би биле доволни. Повторно да речам, сакавме да бидеме пореалистични, не е проблем ние да ставиме и 5 и 10, меѓутоа сакавме она што ќе го предложиме да може реално да биде имплементирано.
Александра, ова се однесува на коментарот на Панче?
Да, на Панче, да.
Панче, дали би сакал да се вклучиш и да дополниш нешто на оваа тема? Повели.
За сите, можам на македонски или?
Да, може слободно на македонски. So for those who want to follow the translation in English, please click on the English channel. For someone speaks Macedonian, English translation is available on English channel. Повели, Панче.
Само ќе го повторам тоа што го напишав во чатот, дека ние сме одговорни за примена на MVP системот во Македонија според Законот за енергетска ефикасност. Зборам за Агенција за енергетика, но тука секогаш и Министерството за економија, бидејќи правилникот за MVP ги дефинира обврските на двата чинители во овој дел и многу комплексно е одржувањето на системот од IT дел, својот хардвер, системски софтвер, апликативен софтвер, сето тоа е многу сложено како задача за овој дел што се бави со енергетска ефикасност, но сакам да кажам дека од делот на поврзување со чинителите во пропишани според правилникот, а тоа се јавниот сектор пред се и некои си ЕСКО евентуално системи развиени во резиденцијалниот сектор, кои што треба да се евидентираат во MVP системот. Всушност, MVP системот евидентира се што е плански подготвено за заштеди во енергетската ефикасност. Тоа се чинителите во јавниот сектор, општините и некои органи на државната власт кои располагаат со објекти и значајна потрошувачка, па и некои јавни предпријатија. Сите подготвуваат трогодишни програми, годишни планови и даваат извештаи, сето тоа во овој MVP систем се евидентира. Се што е како обновлив извор на ниво на финална енергија, исто така се евидентира и токму тоа е најинтересното за овој систем што вие сега го развивате, како да се интегрираат податоците. Значи, во права насока е вашиот проект, ќе даде големи резултати откако ќе се имплементира овој MVP на ниво на делот на енергетска ефикасност, кој што во себе, повторувам, вклучува и обновливи извори кои што директно влијаат на намалување на финалната потрошувачка на енергија. Значи, го поздравуваме проектот. MVP-то е сложен систем. Ако треба за потребите на овој проект, може да се надогради и програмски, но многу е добро што Министерството за економија се присутни во овој проект. За вакво проширување, без Министерството за економија, така наречен АМИН, не може да се проширува MVP системот, но се во рамките на доколку излезе потреба, треба да се испланира таа промена и секако анализата што еве Дарко е сосем добро запознаен со состојбата во Агенцијата за енергетика, бидејќи го учествуваше, ни помагаше во изработка на функционална анализа и веќе сега циркулира една солидна бројка од работни места кои што треба да одговорат на потребите нови на Агенцијата кон Законот за енергетска ефикасност. Толку од мене, поздрав за сите и благодарам за учеството.
Благодарам, Панче. Твоите коментари се навистина во насока на втората презентација која што ќе ја слушнеме денеска, така да нема да должам многу. Justin, the floor is yours. Alexandra, please unshare your screen.
Hi, everybody. Thank you very much. It was very interesting to listen to the discussions so far, and I think that there's a lot of complementarity between the work that we're looking at and the work being done by HEAT. So I'm going to try and stick to 20 minutes and give you an overview of the work that we're doing. And also I'm going to do this in in Mentimeter. So I'm going to share a link so that people can join the discussion. Feel free to contribute if you want to. You don't have to, but it's quite nice to see people's views as we're going through the work and the presentation. Allows me to gauge understanding, views, approaches from the floor. It also gives you something to do if you're a little bored of my voice. So you can go to www.menti.com and put in the code that's at the top of the page, which is 834146.6. You'll be able to see on your browser or in your device the slides that I'm presenting, but you also have the opportunity to move some sliders and give some views or even ask some questions as I go along. So I encourage you to do that. So the main focus for this work is to look at an MRV system. MRV is quite a well-used term, and I'll come up with some explanation about that shortly. System and platform, they're interchangeable. Platform is really the thing or an element of the tools that an MRV system has. So the MRV system itself I see as being this broad combination of people, data flows, users, data providers, and the tools that are used, reports for templates, etc., etc. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about how we see the platform supporting this machine that helps to produce updated reports, helps to engage stakeholders in decision making, and helps to present a clear picture of where North Macedonia is now and where it could go in the future on climate change. So really what we're looking at from the MRV platform point of view is tools and a tool for enabling this institutional memory. And there's a broad spectrum of bits and pieces underneath the bonnet of this machine. But it is only a machine, and it relies on the people to drive it in the right direction and to use it effectively to achieve the ambitious goals that North Macedonia will set itself or has set itself across mitigation, adaptation aspects of climate change. So what we're really focusing on is trying to build a tool, and it's a flexible tool or set of tools that will enable this regular data flow, sustained expert teams, regular reports, and continuous improvement. And we talk about this a lot in lots of different contexts. So we're trying to gather the understanding of the needs, the different users, the different types of outputs, etc. And I'll present to you some terms and explanations for these, and try to gather information from people about what are the priorities. So the project team, this is a project that's being led by Ether, by my company. Lawrence Opie is there in the audience. He's been very active in coordinating the team of experts, in interacting with national people in North Macedonia. Myself, I'm a technical lead and also overseeing the project. We're also working with the Greenhouse Gas Management Institute with some of their IT expertise and MRV experts. And we have national consultants, Eleanor and Verisa, who have been providing invaluable insights into what already exists, where the bottlenecks and difficulties already are, and giving their perspective on our idealized views of an MRV platform and MRV system. So we've got a great team working on this project. Just to mention the scope and the aim of the project is really to build a specification for a system. The development of the system will come next. And that specification, the underpinning objectives is to shift the working practices from the project-based cycle to a continuous process. So continuous or well-established data flows, experts that are available ad hoc to answer important questions at the right time, and not just compile reports. But obviously those experts are also there to compile these important reports. Of course, it's going to support the delivery of very good quality reports under the Paris Agreement and the EU, and we've heard a bit about all these acronym reports, the national communications, the BTRs, the BURs, the NAPs, the adaptation communications, etc., etc. And I have some lists that you can comment on about those types of reports, but it will support the delivery of those reports, bring teams together, bring data together. And fundamentally, it hopefully will be a resource to enable the domestic engagement of stakeholders, the acceleration of climate change action, and really to highlight areas of win-win with other strategies that will attract investment and support positive change, not just on climate policies, but on other policies for the environment, for social cohesion, energy security, etc. So as I mentioned, this is an interactive session. If you haven't already, I encourage you to open a browser and go to www.menti.com and enter the code 834146. I'm going to ask some questions. You have no obligation to answer, but we have some graphs that show the live contributions from people, so I hope some people do. In any case, the points I'm going to talk through and the questions that I'm asking will help me to explain to you what this MRV platform concept is and the terms and activities around it. So yeah, please have a look at the link in the Zoom chat that I also shared. And if you want to ask questions in this voting window, there's a ask a question or feedback section at the bottom of it. You can click on that and I'll receive a little notification here, which I can check and respond to as we go along. Yeah, feel free to click on the hearts. It keeps me awake as well. So first of all, if you can just provide some basic details about yourself, this just helps us. If you have some comments later on that you've written, we can come back to you. It also gives us a little bit more context of your interests in MRV, and so we can actually begin to build a picture of the users and who they are, what their key interests are, and we can then use that to define the user requirements for the building of the MRV system. You don't have to provide this information, but it can be helpful. So I have a question: how many user roles the MRV system foresees? This is something we're still working on. So there will be, of course, the administrator or somebody who can change the structure of the system. We'll have some super content users who can change any content. And then we'll have another layer of users that would be specific to their content and can manage their own data but not change anyone else's. And then we would probably have some browser type users, so people who can view some or all of the content in the system but not change any of it. Bear in mind, this is an expert system designed for the builders of the MRV system, the contributors of the MRV system, to help them do their work. Data can be taken out of it for reports, data can be taken out of it for public consumption, but it's not designed to have the general public browsing through the material that's there. It'll be safe and secure, working information, detailed information for the teams. Okay, so the first sort of follow-on question is just to get a gauge of what areas people work in. I'm particularly interested in this because I want to know the reach the system wants to have across the different sectoral domains. We have a very strong focus on producing these reports, but what we want the MRV system to do is to do more than that. We want the MRV system to engage with expertise that understands sectoral policy, understands engineering and the technical aspects of these different sectors, that can then blend this climate knowledge with the economics and the technical knowledge of those sectors to make the right decisions on how to push forward those sectors and develop. So, looking at adaptation, mitigation, implementation, these kind of people are focused on the climate lens and making sure that those actions happen. But we also have people that we need to engage with in the specialist sectors, in specialist industries. And so looking at energy and transport, there's obviously policies there that affect greenhouse gas emissions or that may be affected by climate change, and so need adaptation included. Agriculture, forestry, I don't really need to highlight the issues of water and forest fires and the issues of species, biodiversity, but also we've got the emissions that come from agriculture, the emissions that come from forestry. And these sectoral analysts are the ones that really understand these sectors properly. They understand the economics of the sectors, they understand the machines that are used, they understand the activities that go on. As a generalist, as an inventory person, I understand to some extent how to convert activity into emissions, but I don't understand how to make sure these sectors flourish with all the constraints that we are now having. So it's really important that the MRV system engages these sector analysts, these sector specialists. And this can be across the public sector and the private sector. And ideally, we have a blend of both of those. We've obviously got the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. We've got this concept of the monitoring of climate impacts, looking at vulnerabilities and risks. So that's important if we're bringing in adaptation. Economy and finance, well, you like it or love it, without money, nothing happens. So we need to engage these people who manage the finances, make financial justifications for change. Broader aspects are environmental protection, sustainable development goals, things like just transition, so making sure that people aren't disadvantaged or unemployed by a move from using fossil fuels to renewable energy. And then we've got the social and gender aspects that we also need to take into account. So although we're focusing on this climate lens, we really need to start appreciating that this needs to be integrated with a much broader group of stakeholders, and where we can bring pieces of information about the climate impacts to this broader community, the better. So I'm going to move a bit faster through the rest of my presentation. In terms of the need for this sustainable MRV system, we've got things like the UNFCCC reporting, we've got Paris Agreement MPGs, we've got energy community governance, energy union, national laws on climate change, the EU instruments. All of these things are demanding some knowledge exchange, some reporting on climate and the position. Okay, so maybe just clarify. The information provided here is partly just for the presentation purposes, so that other people can see what other people are thinking and feeling. We will also share the general slides, not the detail behind, so your views won't be picked out or identified, but you'll be able to see these graphs later on. And we'll also use it to help modify our view of what the MRV system specification should be. So you know, these things here are the kinds of driving forces for an MRV system. We can see a lot of reports coming up, but it's not just the reports, it's the underlying interaction with stakeholders that is needed to generate good content in these reports, to present clear, transparent views of the problems and the actions. So there's probably many more, but these are the sort of high level driving forces for this work. The MRV system itself, so we've talked about what it should do. We've had a lot of thinking about what the platform should provide itself. So one of the key general points is that it's a place to put things that doesn't disappear, that can be further elaborated and used, can be shared amongst an expert community. You can come back to when you're updating reports and information. So it's a place to put things. You can share knowledge tools, templates, so models that have been used before, calculation tools. We can structure some information in the portal. So some of this information that we continually go back to about actions and indicators, we can structure it, we can store detailed information on it, we can update it on a regular basis, we can start to educate other stakeholders about the structuring of information that we need, so that when we're asking for it or when we're presenting on it, people start to understand. We can manage quality through it. So if we're bringing stuff together into one place, we've got experts attached to it, we can get stuff reviewed. We can have workflows that indicate whether material has been reviewed or whether it's sort of preliminary draft, etc. We can have lists that will identify the quality objectives. We can have activities listed that show these are the activities we're going to do, and we can log the verification or the improvement activities that are ongoing. And somewhere for experts to go. They can have a chat, there's a forums, they can put documents there, they can build their own workspaces so they can work collaboratively around things. So this is a sort of high level view of how the MRV platform and what it should provide. In terms of what it should do, it's going to help the regular compilation of data. It's in a generic term. If you think of the inventory, that needs to be updated. If you apply that principle to adaptation work, there's updates that people will be calling for on loss and damage, on vulnerabilities, on climate trends. So in a similar way, we can start to use the portal to facilitate this regular update of data. Indicators are talked about a lot. What are they? Where are they kept? How are they looked after? Well, the MRV platform can provide a facility for that. Ad hoc analysis. So you've got a resource of data, you've got material and knowledge, you've got experts brought together. You can use the MRV platform to start to build ad hoc analysis, save that somewhere, find it again, build on it, use it. Writing insightful analysis reports, I suppose that's similar to the point above. Again, the platform provides a place for that. The platform provides a place to develop and archive your national reports, the background material associated with them, so nothing gets lost. So when the project ends from producing a particular report, all the information can be stored and accessed from the platform. Of course, we want to engage with stakeholders implementing actions. So some of those technical hands-on stakeholders can have access to the system, contribute data, or just browse the information that's there. And maybe even engaging with the international climate change community, either through the MRV system portal, which probably is unlikely, but because you've got a collection of information and people there, then you're going to have a better group to engage with. In terms of the scope of the MRV system and portal, we very much want it to include as much information as possible. So activity data, greenhouse gas emissions, data on sort of climate monitoring, loss and damage, vulnerabilities, risks, resilience, the actions for mitigation, adaptation, information on support and investment, wider impacts, and indicators. This isn't necessarily going to be the primary residence of this information, but we think that looking at all these different reports, somehow we need to consolidate information from a large number of different places, and we need to have, at a certain level of detail, maybe not the full level of detail, but we need to have a certain level of detail, this type of information in the system. Now, there will be other systems like information on finance that will probably come from national budgeting systems. We want to get some of that information, a summary, a snapshot, include it in the MRV portal and allow us to match that up with actions and produce summary reports about the finance and support for projects versus the projects that they're supporting. So yeah, there's a wide range within the scope of the system. A little bit about the type of information that we would focus on structuring, because the narratives in a lot of these reports are going to be along the lines of what action's being taken, how we're getting on with the action, so the NDCs, NAPs. We feel that we want to structure information around these concepts here. So first of all, what are the threats and challenges we're facing? Because without those, we can't justify taking action. So we need some information on the threats and challenges. This is be summary information, like summary information from the greenhouse gas inventory. We obviously need the outcomes, so we need to list the targets, information that we need from the system, that we're focusing on achieving, so we can present those in reports, we can present narratives on those. The actions, that's be central to the MRV system, and then linking to actions, the support needed, the wider impacts, a range of information that sort of provide context to the action and allow other stakeholders to understand what's going on with the action and whether that action is complementary to their agendas or whether there's conflicts. Indicators, we can have indicators on any of the above that we might want to include in the system. So tracking outcomes, challenges, how the greenhouse gas inventory is doing, how the implementation of certain energy measures are doing. And then finally, the constraints and gaps. So these are the things that may be blocking progress. We need to report on these. It's good to compile a list of these and link them to the actions that they may be blocking and highlight means to remove those constraints and gaps. I'm out of time, Pavlina, so I can carry on a bit more. We can stop.
How many slides more you have, Justin?
I'm not entirely sure, but maybe 3 or 4.
I think that you can continue by 1 o'clock, then we can have enough time for discussion. So just speed up.
Sure, I'll speed up. Okay. So one of the key focuses of our world has been to date producing these reports. And these report deadlines come along, we form a team, and we produce the report. We still need to do that, but we can manage that process within the MRV platform and system. And these are just some of the reports that would be a regular occurrence within the MRV system. Bearing in mind the time frame between these reports is quite large, it's very important to understand how this data was put together in the first place, make sure we keep the background information. And when we come to updating these reports, we can start from not from zero. So we've got spreadsheets and background papers that we can look at and update. We may even have stakeholder contacts that we can get back in contact with to find out, if they want to engage again, if they want to provide updates and insights. So we would have a list really in the MRV system of all the reports and contributions that it makes. And this is just some of the high level ones and activities. In terms of the framework, I'm not going to talk about the follow-on slides from this, but this is the sort of high level framework that we're looking at to support and we need really to support the platform activities. So as was mentioned before, and a lot of good work has gone into looking at the organizational or the institutional arrangements. We've got these 5 components where we feel is important to continue to develop. So first of all, it's the laws and mandates, and it's the things that ensure that data is there when you need it, ensure that experts have a day job which is focused around this work and they can respond as needed. They're available to answer questions on reports. They're available to produce reports. They do regular analysis. So these organizational mandates are critically important, and the law and the laws being developed should crystallize those, but we also need to go down to the level of almost terms of reference and job descriptions and numbers of people in post. Associated with that, we need to have experts that understand this stuff, and these experts are going to be dispersed in different ministries, agencies, private consultants, universities. So we need to identify them. We need to bring them into the system and give them some motivation to contribute on a regular basis, to provide some insights to more junior people so that the succession's there. Of course, we need a regular flow of data, so we need to engage with data suppliers. First of all, we need a list of them. Then we need to go to them and ask them about the data that we've used before, whether it can be improved, where there are gaps that they could help contribute to, and importantly, make sure that data doesn't disappear and you have data available for updating your indicators and your reports. The MRV platform is one of the systems and tools, but there's a host of systems and tools that are needed to make the MRV system work. These are the inventory compilation files, models for projections, analysis tools for climate scenarios, vulnerability. There's a whole host of things that are needed for the MRV system to function, and the platform can be a central place for those, a place where they're recorded, where everyone understands these critical tools. And finally, engaging stakeholders. These stakeholders need to value the outputs from the MRV system. So those would be the users. These would be the National Climate Change Council people, decision makers in different ministries, private sector, and even the public. The more we can get the MRV system through the good work of the platform to engage using stakeholders that take that data for decision making, the better. But also the data providers. This system of MRV only works when we get good data and we get continuously improving data. So proactive activity to engage stakeholders needs to be encouraged. So I've got some follow-on slides that I'm going to go through just to show you them. I'm not going to talk through them. I'm going to make this presentation available. You can go through the voting side again afterwards if you want to, but you can also browse through it. So just in like a couple of minutes, I'm going to go through these subcomponents. This is an organizational diagram example on the right-hand side. These are the kinds of roles that we see in the MRV system. Expertise, so these are the sort of expert roles that we need for a complete MRV system to function. This table is a conceptual table of the numbers of person day equivalents, and I know that the heat work has been much more detailed on this, but this is something that we've compiled and updated a few times for a few countries, so that might be worth looking at. The data flows, these are the types of data flows we need to make the system work, and these need to be regular, reliable data flows. There's one-off stuff in places, but we need to start making this into an updatable process. The systems and tools, so we've got databases of stakeholders, QA/QC, various detailed technical tools, and there's probably more. And then finally, stakeholder engagement. So, how do we engage with the important National Climate Change Council, with other ministries? What about public engagement? What can we do on workshops, webinars on a regular basis for engaging data suppliers and users? And are there climate change communication strategies that the MRV system can contribute to? And finally, a question about who would be using the platform. We see that it's going to be an expert system. It's going to be focused around the focal point for climate change, but we want to get more broader stakeholder engagement in looking after the content. So these are the types of organizations I would see being involved. And a question really for later and for the discussion is what should the key functions of the system and the platform be? So sorry about overrunning, but thank you very much for your time and your initial
Thank you, Justin. I think that we still have 15 minutes for discussion. If we push through that deadline, I don't think that people that are interested in this topic would mind. I would like to thank you for the very interesting and engaging presentation. And before we start with the questions or approach from someone from the audience, I would like to highlight a couple of issues. So this presentation today about the MRV platform, monitoring, reporting and verification of climate change policies and action platform, is just the beginning. So don't be afraid if you hear many words and terms that you don't know what they mean. So it will get clear soon. We just wanted to express the scope and the difference of the information that this platform can contain. It will not be something that it will be identical as other existing solutions. So ITER is engaged to design the platform itself. They will do it in cooperation with all relevant stakeholders in the country. And then an IT company will be engaged to actually develop this platform. So it should be integrated with other existing systems like the MVP software or Excite or other softwares that are in the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning. So they should be closely integrated. And also this platform should be fully integrated with the National Environmental Information System that the Ministry of Environment and Physical Planning is currently implementing. So the floor is open. Please unmute yourself or ask some questions or provide some additional clarifications.
While people are getting ready, I just shared 2 links. One to the voting, again, if you want to go through all the slides, there's more there. And the other is to the presentation itself, so you can see how those graphs have shaped up so far. And you can revisit it maybe after other people have added more votes to see it again.
Okay.
Maybe I would like to ask some question. Let me try to make me visible.
Yes.
Pali, if you allow me.
Yes, of course.
Okay, my name is Zoran Velichkov. I'm part of the project DEMIS, Development of Environmental Monitoring and Information System, National. And Justin, thank you for a very interesting presentation, a very good presentation of the scope that should be covered by this MRV platform. I don't know at which stage you are in the development of the specification. Just general question. The main point is I usually simplify development of IT systems. This is very simple job. Get data, store data, use data. Looking at the beginning, you said that all stakeholders that provides data will be or are identified. I didn't understand, did you pass that phase? Are all data streams related to getting data related to greenhouse emissions are already identified? What data, who is providing which data? Is there any specification? Do you plan to go in that direction? Because there is a need to integrate all this system especially in the ministry. And it would be interesting to have one common platform where data will be collected from all institutions. Some of the data maybe can be overlapped between different platforms, and this is something that we need to avoid. do you have any background job in that area, or I don't know at which phase of the process you are?
Okay, yes, we're at a relatively early phase in the process of understanding who the actors are, who the stakeholders are. We're taking a very high-level view of the system because we don't want to constrain any compilation activities that are already ongoing and under stress. And a lot of this work is to produce information is still in the R&D phase. People are still figuring out how to come up with estimates of different things, and they're using tools and systems that are familiar to themselves. And they're changing their methodologies, data sources, and assumptions all the time. So what the MRV platform will do will put a system in place that will hopefully support that. So the greenhouse gas inventory work, we're not proposing that the inventory team have to use a new compilation system, but we want to bring in the activities of compiling the inventory into a structured format and approach, continue using their systems for the moment, but supporting where they want to formalize some of those processes, some of those data collection activities, because they're sure that they're the right ones to use and that they can put the investment into formalizing them. So we're very much starting to understand who the users are and what the data flow is and how to manage that data. We want to try and build flexibility into the system so that we are allowing organizations to bring together information that they've compiled using their own systems that can then be used to give an overview, give some summaries, support reporting, support development of indicators, packages of indicators, and do these high-level reports, but also provide a resource to be mined for other ad hoc answering questions from policymakers and decision makers.
Thank you, Justin. I would just like to complement that in the initial phase in the report that was shared with the people that were invited to this event, we have tried to identify the scope, the institutions that are responsible, and potential indicators. So we will try to identify the all bulk of data that we need, and the next step would be to try and see if other systems or other existing platforms compile those data. So the next step would be actually to see what kind of data are already collected, and to connect to those systems and to focus on the data that are not collected at the moment and that can be put it in the MRV platform. That does not mean that the MRV platform will contain only the data that are not collected so far. By connecting to the existing system, we will be able to translate the other information and get really a comprehensive and full picture that will help us monitor, report, and verify in the end the climate policies and actions, their implementation. And we will try to include, to the extent possible, some kind of basic reports and analysis that can alert if some implementation of some policies and actions are not going as planned. So some follow-up action can be done by respective institutions or the government.
Okay, thank you. Very clear.
Okay, any more news? I'm reading the chat box. Any more comments or additional input?
Maybe I can just add one thing that hopefully also clarifies what people are thinking. One of the constructs or concepts in the MRV platform we expect to exist will be a list of the data sources. So this would just be a place for collectively experts to list down the data sources that are needed for different MRV analysis. So the inventory probably already uses 100, 150 different data sources. Nobody really knows what those are unless you dig into the detailed calculations. So the idea of the MRV platform would be that there is essentially some institutional memory of where all this data comes from, who's responsible for it when it's compiled and when it's available.
Okay, Maya has a question. Maya, please unmute.
Добар ден, ме слушате?
Да.
Пошто сум малце парни стани со нетов. Кратко, околу начинот на собирање на податоци, претпоставам дека ќе има некаков момент
Маја, бидејќи преведувачите полека малку.
Добро. Ајде. Околу собирањето на податоци, претпоставам дека ќе има некаков начин на сертифицирање и централизирање кои податоци се важни, односно кои податоци се релевантни, кои не се. Мене другиот момент ме интересира размислувањето околу како и кој ќе ги спроведува сите активности во сите министерства, агенции, така натаму, затоа што ова е тема која што е крос-катинг во сите институции. Ќе имаме ли некој кој што е одговорен за спроведување на истото, или ќе биде малте некако досега, па за ингеренции за вода ќе се бркаме со сите башка, или ќе има некаков централизиран систем кој ќе следи како се имплементираат активностите и кој каде нешто направил плюс, негде минус, за да може да, не знам, да се пегла имплементацијата на сите акции и активности.
Значи, во стратешките документи кои што ги имаме подготвено до сега, како што се, например, Enhanced NDC, BNL Update Reports и слично, има табела каде што секоја од климатските акции е опишана во детали, вклучувајќи која институција е одговорна за имплементирање на таа агенција. Во овој систем ќе може тоа да се види, како да кажам, полесно и поелектронски, например, за дали по сектор или по институција за кои работи се одговорни, и системот би требало да возможува процентуално на некој начин следење на степенот на имплементација. Сега мислам дека тоа е случај со стратегијата за климатска акција. Теодора не ја гледам веќе тука, но можеби Елена би можела да каже нешто на таа тема.
Во однос на оној institutional setup, кој, како и кога ќе ги испроведува акциите што се дефинирани во долгорочната стратегија за климатска акција, значи во исто време проектот подготви и закони, подзаконски акти кои што алоцираат одговорности. Во едниот подзаконски акт, Rulebook for GHG Reporting или правилник за известување за емисии, се дефинираат ингеренции во однос на известување, институционални ингеренции во однос на известување за емисии на стакленички гасови. Во однос на политиките и мерките, како ќе се известува, исто така законот дефинира одговорност, не дефинира одговорност специфична институција, дефинира одговорност кон Министерството за животна средина како National Authority за да го ја координира климатската акција и да ги собира овие податоци. И во исто време има член 55 на законот, параграф 5, мислам дека беше така, мислам дека поголем дел од вас веќе го имаат законот, значи дефинира, отвара можност за изработка на уште еден подзаконски акт за дефинирање на формата и содржината и начинот и одговорноста за собирање на информации што се однесуваат на спроведување на политики и мерки, тоест на некој начин за системи од овој тип, кои што се служат за мониторинг на спроведувањето на политиките и мерките. така да законот како закон дефинира одговорност за координација, дефинира одговорност за собирање на податоци што се однесуваат на ГХГ и инвентарот и дополнително отвара простор за изработка на уште еден подзаконски акт кој што би ги дефинирал во детали ингеренциите и одговорностите на институции за однос за спроведувањето на политиките и мерките.
Значи, климатските промени и сите овие работи, документи кои што се подготвуваат и кои што ги видовме во досегашните презентации, за кои што одредени надлежности имаат Министерство за животна средина, за други Министерство за економија, Агенција за енергетика и слично, ќе бидат опфатени со соодветни законски документи и многу е важно да на едно место на некој начин се собираат и сублимираат сите овие информации. Ќе се обидеме оваа платформа да ја направиме што е можно по-транспарентна и по-детална, но навистина е само почеток, значи ќе треба да се дополнува и во следните години. Не постојано се менуваат и се додаваат други работи и од UNFCCC и од другите институции или енергетската заедница или самата ЕУ. Во насока на тоа е прашањето од Елена, дали здравствениот сектор се планира да биде вклучен во МРВ системот, бидејќи крајната цел е да се сочува здравјето на луѓето од негативните последици за климатски промени. Значи, здравството ќе влезе во делот за адаптација, тоа беше една од оние компонентите на МРВ системот. Во рамките на овој проект ќе се направи, да кажам, основно поврзување со секторите кои што досега беа разгледувани од аспект за ранливост и адаптација кон климатските промени, каде што здравството и играше значителна улога, но сите овие работи поврзани со адаптацијата ќе бидат дефинирани во поголема мера во рамките на националниот план за адаптација кон климатските промени, кој што би требало да започне кон крајот на оваа година. Идејата позади сето тоа е дека до сега ги разгледувавме овие сектори како поединечни, но имајќи во предвид брзиот развој на проблематиката поврзана со климатски промени, потребно е да се користат така наречени нексус пристапи. Тоа значи дека ако во прогнозите покажуваат дека ќе имаме се поголеми екстреми, се помалку врнежи, тоа во време кога не ни се, например, потребни како за производство на храна и слично, дали таа вода што ќе ја имаме, која што ќе ја користиме за производство на електрична енергија или ќе ја користиме за производство на храна или за лична употреба на луѓето. Така да здравствениот аспект ќе биде навистина многу важен, не само од овој нексус пристап, има и многу други и ќе го имаме во предвид. Затоа велам дека оваа платформа и овој иницијален дизајн сега понатаму ќе се доработува во текот на следните години и ќе се надополнува, затоа секако ќе биде оставено место во самата платформа. Ние сакавме да почнеме и порано со здравствениот систем, бидејќи има многу аспекти од кои што може да се земе, но имајќи во предвид колку се оптеретени сега здравствените работници со оваа корона пандемија, ќе мора малце да почекаме да се стишаат работите и да ги ставиме оние работи кои што ги имаме како информации до сега. Можам исто така да надополнам дека Светската здравствена организација има одредени планови и проекти кои што се поврзани со климатските промени со здравствениот сектор и кои што ги планира да ги работи оваа година, но се зависи од тоа како ќе се одвиваат работите со ковидот, па не би сакала однапред да зборувам на таа тема, но секако е многу важен сектор, како и многу други, и ќе биде земено во предвид. Дали податоците ќе подлежат на верификација? Би требало да подлежат и значи податоците има тоа quality assurance, quality control механизми. Дополнителна верификација која што ќе треба да се стави е верификација на намалувањата на емисиите, но за таа ќе треба да се направат одредени промени во законската легислатива и да се формираат одредени тела, така да верификација на податоците ќе има и начини како тоа да се прави, но за верификација на намалувањето на самите емисии тоа ќе биде оставен просторно како активности или рамка и опсек во кој што ќе треба да се работи, ќе биде во идниот период подетално разгледано. Јас не гледам други прашања, дали некој друг може би сакал да се јави за спор? Ако не, ви благодарам на сите. Мислам дека отвори ова можност за размислување за соработка и во следниот период. Како петок да не ве задржуваме повеќе, многу ви благодарам на сите за учеството и ви посакувам пријатен викенд на сите.
Благодариме, пријатно.
Благодарам, пријатно.
Чао, чао.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.